think I remember you translated this poem a really long time ago. And if I'm remembering right at the time, you said that one way of looking at it was that the second to last line, that those who have gone before, that who were kind of infected by the sorrow, and that became all they lived for. That was kind of passed down. And I guess my question is there any way that in seeing it that way, that there can be some sort of comfort in the comfortlessness of it, and
I think whenever you're able to express negative emotions or sad emotions, not so much negative but sad emotions, if you're able to express them eloquently, I think you make them very, very meaningful. You know, and I think that's really the trick. You know, the trick is having enough power. And you can get this power through a lot of practice, trial and errors, where you have understood the nature of sorrow, how it comes about, what it does, how it impacts you. And then you write about it. Or you talk about it, or you paint it, or you music it. You know, but you have to be able to express it, and that makes it meaningful. You know, there is this, I think she's from Bosnia, if I'm not mistaken. She's a daughter of an immigrant, and anyway, she's this great pianist. She plays classical piano, and you know, sometimes when she plays, her facial expression there is this sadness, and personally I enjoy watching that. You know, that this is a woman who feels the sadness and yet is able to express it on the piano so eloquently. You know, and you don't really know what to watch, if you should watch her face, or you should listen to the piano, or if you should look at the way she moves her fingers on the board, because they're all so intoxicating, you know. You know, it's kind of when you love someone and they're far away and you write poetry. I mean, it's filled with sorrow and sadness, longing and yearning, these really intense desires that they've just broken your heart. And yet, you know, if you have a poetic nature to you, you sit and you write a poem, and it becomes quite healing. You can't do anything um, if there is poverty without having the power to express that poverty eloquently and meaningfully. You know, it's interesting when they capture a shooter who has killed like 19, 20 people, and they happen to be 18 or 19. Once captured, they take him to a cell and they have a conversation with this person. And then he begins to tell you about his life story. His father was a drunk. His mother was absent. People around his own age would push him around, bully him. And you kind of, or I don't know if you have kept up or you watched any of the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, trial, especially when Johnny Depp was on the stand, kind of telling us who his father was, who his mother was, how much abuse they endured. The only difference between a mass shooter and Johnny Depp is that he had the power of having good looks. He had the power of having the right connections. Because of his looks and connections, he was able to do some commercials and then some movies. And when you look at the movies that he plays, he's very eccentric. The mass shooter was never really trained to express the abuse he suffered by the hands of his parents, his friends, people at large, teachers. And so violence became his companion. And I think that's one of the things, going back to Alison's question, which is, if you're sitting home and you're alone and you feel that life is tough and your back is beginning to break, you pick up the phone, you call Alison, or you pick up and you talk to Stacy, and then you have 2, 3, 4, 5 hour conversation, and all of a sudden you realize that the clouds are slowly moving away, and you feel lighter, and that's what happens. You begin to talk about your sorrow, your estrangement, in a very meaningful way. It's an intentional conversation. It's not random, it's not accidental. You're going to talk to this person about a specific thing, and that sadness all of a sudden blossoms into something quite beautiful. In the absence of that, it's just a mess, until you grow a really, really, really thick skin where you can just kind of take life's abuse and not say anything. You can handle it. San Francisco, when I had defended my thesis, there was Ruth Nair, Mary something, and then Seth. He's probably now dead. And they said to me, can you step out of the room so we can kind of talk amongst ourselves as to whether this qualifies or not. So sure. I come back and says, well, congratulations, you have your master's degree. Thank you. And Mary something looks at me and says, you should really be happy. I said, yeah, I'm really happy. I said, no, you should really be happy. You don't look at, I'm really happy, thank you. And it's not so much about me, it's just about, when you kind of come to realize that you don't want to build your house, your home, on sand. I don't want to build my identity on a master's degree that's cheap and stupid. You're just unintelligent, or going to an interview and having 5 people like me, screw them. It's important to get a job. I remember I was doing an independent study with Jacob Needleman, and it was on the cloud of unknowing. He says, well, you should write like a page for each chapter. There are like 50 chapters. So I go to his office and he says, well, I didn't write any. So what do you mean you didn't write any? And the book talks about humility and talks about silence and talks about this. So what am I going to write? You read the book, you know what the book says. And he says, Amir, listen, that's good for the heart. It's not good for the mind. In academia, you need the mind. The heart is good, but the mind is necessary. He's right. He didn't explain it to me the right way. But in essence, he was right. But the point I'm trying to make is I didn't care to write because, I'm just going to take a sentence from here and paste it to my own essay and then hand it in for an A. For what? Let me just get an F. At least getting an F is more honest than getting an A. Stacy, anything?
Thank you. Ask another, unless Allison. If it ever comes about, and it seems that it only comes about in a few people maybe, but how does the thick skin come about? Is it simply from taking a lot of abuse and taking it, or like when you talked about needing to be broken in the right way by the right person? Is that...
Well, you only suffer pain and aches when you're in a relationship with something, and that relationship has various degrees of attachment. And in attachment, there are emotional, histories involved. And then in every attachment there is a certain value that you inject, and you see yourself in that value, you know. And when things don't go according to your expectation, then you begin to throw temper tantrums in a variety of shapes and forms. Okay. Now, if you were to go back to Daughter of Fire, what happens is this. For Irina, there is only one source of nourishment. They're not two, they're not three, they're not four. There's only one. And that's Bhai Sahib. She's physically connected to him, emotionally connected to him, intellectually connected to him, spiritually connected to him. Bhai Sahib is Irina's son. When you have that kind of a relationship, that kind of an attachment, it means that you're basically cut off from all the other things that life presents to you. You don't care for them. You only care if he directs you to those things. Otherwise, you don't care. And if you don't care for all the sideshows, then you don't put any values to them. They mean nothing to you. And if they mean nothing, they are irrelevant to you. And if they're irrelevant, they can't harm you, hurt you, disappoint you. You're not interested in them. The only person who can hurt you is Bhai Sahib. And he can hurt you by simply not looking at you, not listening to you, and not seeing you. He's the only person you care about. Only things you care about, they can hurt you and disappoint you, you know. Now, if you have too many things out there to which you're attached, you know, for example, let's say, see, you're attached to John, for example, okay? But you're not really attached to what a relationship is and what it does and how it functions for you. Because if you truly understood the nature of relationships, there's a good chance that you would still be with John. You would just not care as much because you know the function of a relationship. You know, it's like when you drive and someone is like driving a Bentley or a Ferrari, and you say, listen, I just want a car to take me from point A to point B. I don't understand why someone would spend $200,000 on a car, you know, in a place that has so much traffic like San Francisco. You know what? There's no reason for that. And so your interest, your desire to pursue purchasing a Bentley just disappears. You don't have that desire. You know? And I think it's always nice to invest in one single thing. The problem with that is that sometimes when you invest in one single thing, it turns out to be counterfeit, like the fellowship that you guys were talking about. You know. You know, there is this great Sufi, Hassan al-Basri, and as he was walking, there was this old man who almost slipped, and Hassan said, "Oh, be careful, don't slip." And the old man looks at Hassan and says, "Hassan, listen to me. If I slip, only I will fall. If you slip, the entire city will fall, because the entire city depends on you." You know. And you could only have one attachment if there is a great amount of love. You know. It really is kind of like the first 2-3 weeks of any new relationships. where you're willing to kind of just empty your bank account because you like to go out and eat, in and out every day, and you watch movies and you quit your job because you want to spend, all of your time with this person. And in some ways, you're very, very lucky because, 8 billion people on this planet, they just disappear. You don't care for their judgments. You know who you want to be with, whose judgment you really care about. The rest disappear. There's a guy in Berkeley, he is homeless. He's this young man, beautiful face, beautiful eyes. And whenever I would run into him on college in Ashby, I would ask him, I would say, here's $10, he would say no. And then I kind of got this feeling that, there is something really special about this guy. And so I began by asking him, would you let me buy you a sandwich? He says no. And it's interesting for me because as someone who is homeless, you are homeless, you have no place to rest your head. Why wouldn't you want $10 from someone? Buy you a sandwich, get you a room somewhere for a couple of days. And in some ways, I think he's very, very lucky because he has no need for people on the outside. And I always tell Sarah jokingly that I think he's like a sociologist in disguise. He's like experimenting with the public to find out, how people function and all that. When I was in Rome, you had sent a message that do you feel like you've changed in any way. I don't remember exactly how you worded your sentences. There was nothing interesting about the trip. So you walk in this great temple and you see all these great statues. My aunt and her husband was telling me, Dante's house is right there. You can actually go in and see the desk on which he wrote, Divine Comedy and all that. Why the hell would I want to do that? It's just not interesting. Why don't you go to like the museum, Michelangelo's? But there was a guy who played the guitar, a classical guitar, beautiful. You could feel like the years of hard work. I suppose it's good for you guys to go to Rome and Florence, because when you go to the classroom, we can actually talk about this stuff in a different way. You guys have seen the movie Mona Lisa Smile with Julia Roberts, right? Have you? So during the interview, before she was given her position, it's a private school. It's a uppity school. Very rich and privileged kids. And so the committee asks her some questions about if she's seen, these great buildings and statues while she was in Rome. And she said no. I said, you didn't see them? I've never been in Rome. And this is like a course in humanities, I suppose. And the committee is kind of puzzled. They like this woman. They want to give this position to this woman, and yet she hasn't traveled. But there was this rebellious spirit inside her. She was like a living force, that challenged the entire school system and the way she was teaching. And eventually she was fired. But the kids really, really, really loved her, I think if you can go to Rome and find someone who has the spirit of Michelangelo, it would be a good travel. But to go there, just to see things, knowing full well that you left as a homeless person, you're going to come back as a homeless person. Nasser Khosrow has this poem that's 10 pages about Hajj, pilgrimage, where this man goes to this guy who had just come back from, the pilgrimage, and he says, well, did you do this to Satan? Did you do this to God? Did you do this to... And the guy says, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. I went to Hajj, yes, but I didn't do any of the things that you're asking or saying. And the man looks at him and says, my friend, you left as a donkey and you came back worse than a donkey. And that's how the poem ends. Another way you can look at this poem, really, because it's so consumed with pain. On the way to Rome, I had a patch on my neck that kept me from getting airsick. On the way to the US, I put on the patch a little too late, and so it didn't work. I threw up maybe 50 times. And every time I went in the bathroom, whether it was the airport or the plane itself, I had nothing in my stomach. So it was only air that was coming out. By my guts, I felt they were coming out. And there were perhaps 200-300 people on the plane. And yet I felt very alone. And I knew that even if I went to go out and tell somebody, scream that I'm in pain, I'm dying, people would kind of be empathetic, a little sympathetic perhaps a little bit. But they really couldn't do much for me. It's something that they just had to endure, And so I would go to the bathroom. I would just sit on the floor and then put my face in the toilet bowl and just, whatever comes out, comes out. And then I would go back to my seat, close my eyes. And I don't think you can write a different poem than this when you are feeling a good amount of pain, that you are alone, that you want someone to give you a home in your aloneness, but there is none to be found. You want someone to give you hope, that this exile will eventually come to an end, but no such things comes your way. And eventually you say, you know, I have inherited the sins of Adam and Eve. They are on my shoulders. I carry them on a daily basis. You know, it's beautifully devastating. It's a great poem.